Welcome to Ask Dr. Jazz, the podcast. I'm Dr. Jazz. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm going to focus on mental health and try to share some information for your well-being, your relationships, your community. It's not therapy, but it'll still be helpful. It'll be educational. It'll be useful to you. I'm going to talk about mental health topics and relate them to topics that are trending or topics that I think are important to help you better relate to mental health information and maybe be able to apply certain things to your lives. I have the relationship and breakup convos, R&B convos with Trevor Trail Scott, so you can find more relationship focused content there. I have some other content that'll be coming out around relationships, but this will be focused on mental health. So welcome. And the focus of this particular episode is called If You Think You Know About DV and SA, You Don't Know Enough. If you're like, oh no, I do. Unless you work in this field, like not therapy, but unless you work specifically with DV and SA for any reason, chances are you likely don't know as much as you think you know or should know about DV and SA. And I'll go into some things about why it's important that you know. But for now, just trust me, stick with me, and hopefully I can make a little like drop in the bucket of mental health information and DV and SA awareness that'll close the gap just a little bit more. But I would say in order for that to happen, you have to really open your mind to the possibility that maybe some of the things that you think about perpetrators, victims, and how we come to think some of the things that we think may not be true. Not to say that everything you think about DV and SA is not true, but just be open to challenging your belief system is what I would say. This particular episode is going to focus on DVSA and relating it to the Diddy trial and people's reactions, and in particular, a mental health advocate's reaction. And it's not really about the the advocate herself, it's more the fact that she is an advocate. And if an advocate is having difficulty with understanding the nuances of DVSA and victims and perpetrators, then of course, the average person is having difficulty. And beyond that, if the legal system is having difficulty understanding it, of course, the average person who doesn't deal in mental health or trauma or any of these things is going to have difficulty. So if you're like, Dr. Jazz, Diddy's case was not a DV case. Yes, I know you are right. And let me tell you, that was his saving grace that it was not. That wasn't his only saving grace because, again, people not really being informed enough on these topics saved him. But this not being a DV case saved him because his lawyers were willing to use that to say, yes, he's a DV, he's abuser. Yes, he did DV, but this is not DV, right? And they kept on saying there's no coercion. But if you are informed about DV, you know that DV is full of coercion and that you cannot separate the coercion that takes place in DV in other parts of the relationship. There's no way to do that because of the way control and coercion works on the mind. But that saved him, and we'll go more into his case and reactions, and I'm trying to share a little bit of information to give you a better understanding of why I see things the way that I do as a psychologist. But first, I want to share with you how the legal system is just itself is behind in the understanding of DV, sexual crimes, and other things. So only 31 years ago, there was an act, a federal act for domestic violence, sexual crimes, and stalking passed. And that was called the Violence Against Women Act. It was passed in 1994 by Bill Clinton. You were alive when Bill Clinton, probably if you're watching me, you were alive when Bill Clinton was president. I was a kid, but I was still alive when that act was passed. That was not that long ago that the nation decided, okay, maybe we should do something about domestic violence, sex crimes, and stalking across, like maybe we should have like an understanding across the nation about how that's not okay. And certain efforts went towards victims of those crimes and education and other things. There were like various like campaigns and efforts based on that act being passed. So that was a good thing. Well, let me just share with you like a little bit of like things that happened in society that weren't that long ago, and some of them are happening right now. So not that long ago, right? If a woman was raped by her husband, she might be expected to marry him to save her honor and not dishonor her family because her honor was in her sexuality or lack thereof. It wasn't that he's dishonored for aggressing or violating her, is that she would be dishonored if someone that had aggressed or violated her was not her husband. So you're like, oh, that was so long ago. That was so long ago. Okay. Last year, Ohio finally closed its marital rape loophole. If you're like, Dr. Jazz, what the heck is a marital rape loophole, right? I was like, yeah, what is that? Like, what is that? It's a loophole in which that still exists in some states, in which men can rape their wives, and depending on the circumstances, meaning if they weren't violent or, they can get away with it. There were advocates and feminists fighting from the 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up until 2024 to get that marital rape loophole closed. And Ohio's not the only state. Maryland closed theirs 2 years ago. I lived in Maryland before it was closed. I had no idea this existed. I was studying psychology in Maryland at Morgan State University in Baltimore. I wasn't studying trauma necessarily at that point, but I was learning about psychology. And my sister was there. My cousin was there. My friends were there. None of us knew this. And I'm just saying that to say, sometimes we're just not aware. Like, we're aware of certain things that go on in society and that we overlook and that we just accept as unfair, but we don't know, like, how far it goes. And so that really just, for me, when I read that, I was like, that is crazy. And some states still have those loopholes. And that means, like, not only your great grandparents could be subjected to certain things, that means your living grandmother could, your mom could, you could, your daughters could, your sisters could, your friends can. So this is not like some outdated stuff that's been happening. And I don't know if you happen to come across the posts on social media recently in the last week or so that are celebrating 50 years of women being able to buy homes on their own. Before 50 years ago, women could not buy homes on their own. So we hear this stuff and we just kind of glaze over, like, oh yeah, we know. But it's like, I don't know if you know the way all those type of things play a part in the way that we interact now, relationally, sexually, family-wise, in our roles, and how we view victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. So we'll talk more about that, but I'm going to read you some stats. One of the top 5 ways in which women are killed or die is by homicide of an intimate partner. So the top 5 ways that women die, one of them is homicide by an intimate partner. And if that woman is a non-Hispanic Black woman, I know some people think I'm Hispanic because I dance salsa. I am not Hispanic. I am a non-Hispanic Black woman. If you are a non-Hispanic Black woman, the chances of that happening are higher. If you are an Alaskan Native, the chances of it are higher, lower than a non-Hispanic Black woman, but still pretty high. And if you are a Native, if you are an American Native, or what they call American Indian, but Native American, Indigenous, American, which my heritage is also Indigenous American, but I'm Black. So think about that when women die, one of the top 5 reasons is homicide via an intimate partner. So I'm going to read some stats to you. This whole thing won't be about stats. It'll be about the discussion, but I want you to hear these because I think it puts into perspective kind of quickly, if you care, how serious this, how big of a societal and criminal issue this is, and how it affects all of us and how we're all responsible to do something about it. So this is called the 50 eye-opening domestic violence statistics for 2024. U.S. general statistics, they start off with. Around 24 people per minute are victims of physical violence, rape, or stalking by an intimate partner in the U.S. This amounts to over 12 million men and women within a single year. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 10 men experience some form of physical violence by a partner in their lifetime. Annually, domestic violence causes over 1,500 deaths and 2 million injuries in the U.S. 85% of domestic violence victims are women. 85%. Every day, nearly 3 women are killed by an intimate partner. A woman experiences physical abuse every 9 seconds. So we've already been talking for about 10 minutes. Every 9 seconds, a woman experiences physical abuse. If a victim was strangled by their partner in the past, the risk of being killed by them increases tenfold. 67 to 80% of intimate partner homicides involve physical abuse of the female by the male before the murder. This is true no matter which partner is killed. So, what they're saying is if there's a relationship in which homicide takes place, and it's whether it's the man or woman who dies, meaning whether the man kills the woman or the woman kills the man. Before that, 67 to 80% of the time, the woman was abused by the male partner. Domestic violence costs nearly $8 billion annually in medical and mental health care services. $8 billion. Only about 1 in 5 domestic violence victims with physical injuries seek treatment. Only 1 in 5 with physical injuries. So that means if they don't have physical injuries, less than that. And that means 4 out of 5 that have physical injuries, they're not seeking any help. Most domestic violence incidents are not reported. Around only 20% of sexual assaults are reported, 25% of physical assaults, and 50% of stalking incidents are reported to the police. Only 20%. You heard how many are taking place, and you heard that they estimate, and only 20% of rape sexual assaults are being reported. Domestic violence goes far beyond physical violence, and a relationship does not have to include physical violence to be abusive. There is psychological abuse, which entails fear, intimidation, threatening harm to themselves or others, isolation, manipulation. Harm is not just physical harm. So just keep that in mind. Threatening harm, intimidating harm to themselves, harm to the others, isolating you, and manipulation. Isolating you could be causing problems with your friends so that you don't have friends. Isolating you could be telling you how your family members are bad or do this, this, and that. And so you shouldn't talk to them as much, or why do you have to spend so much time with it? There's a lot on each of these things that if you research any one of these things, is going to be a plethora of information. Emotional abuse, intentionally sabotaging self-esteem, gaslighting, humiliation. Keep these things in mind for when we talk about the child. Financial abuse, forcing financial dependency to maintain control. Physical abuse, this is one people are most familiar with and think about the most when they think about DV, but it's not the only one. Causing or trying to cause pain, damaging property when angry, driving recklessly, abandonment in unknown or dangerous places, blocking exits, forcing exits, preventing calls to police or medical attention. Sexual abuse, cheating, accusations, sexual insults or name calling, force or manipulation. Remember manipulation, remember force. So, one thing to remember about what I told you earlier, the top 5 reasons that women die is homicide. That is the number one reason women die when they're pregnant or postpartum. So, over 320,000 pregnant women are abused by their partners each year. Around 6% of people experience emotional, physical, or sexual violence during pregnancy by an intimate partner. For 30% of women, the first abuse incident occurs during pregnancy. So, meaning of those people that experience it, the first time for 30% of them is during the pregnancy. Because I've heard times where a woman has said on social media that he never hit me or did any of this stuff before I became pregnant. And there's information on certain types of partners or men who have certain traits, including like narcissistic traits and other traits. And I know like people use narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic all the time, and they're using it, overusing it, but it's a real thing. And there are people that have these traits, and not just people with narcissism, but other disorders and just misogyny. And we'll talk more about that. can engage in these type of behaviors where they feel left out or not as attended to, or all types of reasons where they become violent towards a pregnant woman or a postpartum woman. Homicide is the leading cause of death for pregnant women or those who recently gave birth. So just imagine a woman carrying her baby and she's killed, and the chances of her being killed are higher when she's carrying a baby or when she's giving birth in postpartum, trying to heal from giving birth to a baby and trying to take care of a baby, and her partner kills her. These rates tend to be higher in regions with reproductive care restrictions and lenient firearm laws. Over 2/3 of people who experience intimate partner violence during pregnancy also experience it before pregnancy. Sexual violence. An American is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. Every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. So every 68 seconds, that's about a minute, right? That's about every minute. We've been talking now for about 17 minutes. So, a little less than that of women that have experienced sexual assault since we've been talking. And every 9 minutes, which we're at 18 minutes now, just about, that's 2 children have been the victims of sexual assault since we've been talking. 39% comes from an acquaintance, 33% a current or former significant other, 6% by more than one person or someone the victim can't remember, 2.5% by a non-spouse relative. So most of the abuse occurs with people we know, and 33% is a current or former significant other. 9 out of every 10 U.S. rape victims are female. 1 in 33 U.S. men has experienced an attempted or completed rape. 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. 93% of juvenile victims knew the perpetrator. 59% were an acquaintance. 34% were family members. 93% of juvenile victims knew the perpetrator, and 34% of those were family members. 7% were strangers. 55. So I'm saying this like this to say, we're always thinking about somebody else hurting kids, people that we don't know, or we're thinking sometimes about people we don't know hurting people, when it's the people in their homes. It's the people that they know, whether they're children, teenagers, or adults. And so how is that happening? How is it that the people that they know are doing this? That means that it's not just about what situations you put yourself in. It's not just about you making wrong choices, right? Yes, you can be like, oh, you chose that person as a partner. Why is it that this many people are engaging in violence and assault? It has to do not just with the individual person, but it has to do with the way we condition people in society. It's not that men are just rapists and sexual assaulters. That's not what it is. It's that we are conditioning certain behaviors with men, not that women don't sexually assault, because they do, but we are allowing certain things to go on. We are accepting, we are tolerating, we overlook certain things with people. We just accept that that's what it is. We don't do anything about it. And we condition it, meaning we enable it. We even reinforce it. And so these things are happening to you, your loved ones, not strangers. They're happening to people in your home. They're happening to people whose homes you go to. And if you're not informed enough about DV or SA, you can't really help or support. And matter of fact, the things you might be saying or doing could actually be preventing them from getting help, or not even just telling you but from getting help from anyone. So that's why I'm here today talking about this, because that's my concern. My concern is not Diddy. I think that, like, at this point, Cassie's in good hands to be able to take care of herself and move forward or get help. But my concern is the everyday people with people in their homes who are violating them, and how we as a society don't realize, because we don't know enough about this topic, but we speak on it all the time, how we are reinforcing this in a way that we are raising children, in a way that we are relating to each other. 55%, we only have a couple more. 55% of sexual assaults occur at or near the victim's home. 15% occur in a public place, 12% at a near or a relative's home, 10% in an enclosed space like a parking garage, and 8% on school property. 50% of rape perpetrators are 30 or older, and 57% are white. 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone known to the victim. Only 20, this is the biggest, one of the biggest. Only 25 out of every 1,000 sexual violence perpetrators end up in prison. Only 25 out of every 1,000. So when you're saying to people, why don't you go to the police? Why don't you tell? Why don't you do this? What's happening to them? Nothing. And it's not because there's so many false reports. I'm not saying there's no false reports, but there are way more truthful reports, way more. The percentage of false reports are they're very low. They're less than 10% if they're up to 10%. And I don't even think it's that high of a percentage. Most reports are true. And only 25 out of every 1,000 sexual violence perpetrators end up in jail. So a person's supposed to put themselves in a position to say that they got violated. And there's a lot of shame and guilt that comes with that because of the way we talk about when people are violated, what we believe, what we falsely believe. And so they're supposed to put themselves out there after already having their safety, a physical, mental, sexual safety violated, to offer up this information to the world to judge, to have anything about their history, who they are, put up to judge, just to have nothing happen to the perpetrator. And so that's why a lot of them go free, because it never even gets taken to court. And then when it's taken to court, a lot of times nothing happens. So, and we have a lot to do with that, just society, not just the legal system, because we can push the legal system to enact certain laws. And that's what advocates do, mental health advocates. That's what domestic awareness advocates and victim advocates do, is push to have certain policies and laws changed to protect people. But it starts with all of us. We all are responsible for the fact that these statistics are what they are. So something to know though, that I think relates, and I can't tell you that this is true. This is just what I think, this part. Well, this is true, but I'll tell you what I think about it. Fortunately, sexual violence rates have halved in the last 20 years. Remember that I said that law, the federal law, VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, was enacted how long ago? 31 years ago. So I don't think it's a coincidence that a law was enacted federally across the nation about these kind of crimes and this societal issue, and energy and time and money was put into people who experience this, that the sexual violence rates halved since then. So we have the power to make changes. We're not making them fast enough because we are not aware enough that our beliefs are actually, I don't know, I guess it's just like the more that we learn, we have to update our thinking based on new information. That's how we evolve as a society. That's how we evolve as people. We cannot just hold true to whatever was told to us in the past and think that it can never be challenged or updated. We're always learning new information that tells us, okay, what I thought about this before was not accurate at all, or wasn't all the way accurate. I need to adjust my thinking. That's what it means to be accountable. That's what it means to be objective. So, how you feel about the way I talk about this trial and perpetrator, victim, Cassie, Diddy, Jane, is going to depend a lot on your awareness, conditioning, understanding of certain social factors and the definitions of some things and how we understand some things. So, I'm going to talk briefly about those factors, and I'm not going to be able to change your mind today, but I want you to look into these things on your own and like really research them and try to use reputable sources, meaning understand who you're getting your information from. So don't just read stuff that has stats and not know where those stats come from, who they were based on, who might have an agenda in putting out certain information, because that's a part of doing research as well. But some of the factors that are going to influence how you feel about what I'm saying or what you think about what I'm saying have to do with patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, racism, classism, the legal system, and then other things that are not necessarily isms, but they're important when it comes to this case, and that is accountability and humanity, which I think has a lot to do with the way people see victims and perpetrators of DV and SA. So patriarchy is a system, and it's a system that is basically in the world, and it's a system that operates in the United States. And when I say system, similar to how racism operates on an individual and systemic and like macro societal world level, same thing is true for patriarchy. Patriarchy is the way in which men are upheld, given certain rights, power, resources, access to things that women are not given or are not given to the same degree. So there are things that are patriarchal, like kids' names or the wife's name follow the husband's name. I don't. That's that's up to the individual, and that type of patriarchy. It's is fine with me, and whoever name wise, you make your own decisions. But I'm talking more so, like we said, women couldn't buy homes by themselves until 50 years ago. There's a pay gap. When men are allowed to do certain things in society with aggression, sexual behaviors, and other things, that women are held to a different standard, a more strict standard than men are. So it's this, or you have like ceilings and promotions or keeping people from certain types of jobs. Like there are initiatives to get women involved in STEM jobs and all. It's a whole thing that we operate on that is a part of the fabric of our society and how we grow up. And the thing about these factors is if you don't really understand them and you can't introspect to see how you have internalized these things, the same way if you don't really understand and study racism and how it works and how it is a part of so many things, you also may not be able to understand how you internalize racism. So you could be a black person that's internalized racism, and you can be a woman who's internalized patriarchy. Men can internalize patriarchy too, but you kind of like expect them because it's more to their benefit. Now, when I say it's to their benefit, doesn't mean that it's healthy. It doesn't mean that it's adaptive. It means they get more things that help them stay in power, and the ability to oppress others is not always a good thing. And you can kind of see that. Well, let me say this. So, patriarchy is a system in which men are upheld in a certain way and women are second class citizens. And sexism is the attitudes and beliefs about women in negative ways and men in positive ways that are like discriminatory prejudice beliefs. That's sexism that people act upon. Now, when it involves like hatred and violence and aggression towards women, that is an unfair treatment that is inhumane and has to do with things like sex and other things. That is misogyny. So right now we are dealing with something called the male loneliness epidemic. A that is actually due to patriarchy. So the fact people don't understand that, because it's like, well, how does patriarchy, if it upholds men, lead men to a male loneliness epidemic? That's a big subject all on its own. But to try to briefly put it, patriarchy in many senses is not a good thing. Sexism is not either. You have something like benevolent sexism, like chivalry, and then you have something that is hostile sexism, like thinking that it's okay to sexually assault women and thinking that they shouldn't say anything and it's part of like just something that they have to deal with, or that it's okay for men to cheat and that if they do, it's the women's fault, stuff like that. The thing about it is that is unfair, that is unhealthy, that is maladaptive. And soon, depending on how things change and who has resources or the way people fight for rights, people don't want to deal with certain things anymore. So you're teaching men to look at women in negative ways, And then so the way that they relate to women or try to have relationships with women or think things that they think they're entitled to, it starts to build a resentment and other issues that you are seeing in the male loneliness epidemic. Also, as time goes on and women get rights and they don't want to deal with being treated unfairly. They not necessarily that everything has to be equal and that men or women can't have certain roles, but people don't want to be oppressed. And some people will agree with being oppressed. Like if you think of in terms of slavery, there were slaves or enslaved people who didn't want to fight back against being enslaved. They wanted to try to because they were afraid. It's not that they wanted to be enslaved. They've seen certain things happen to the slaves who fight back, who run away. Right. So in their fear and their oppression, they are so fearful that they rather try to take their chances by trying to do what the people enslaving them say or the rules they impose, even if they're not fair and they could still be harmed anyway. They're like, okay, let me try to live within this structure that has been set up in this way. Maybe if I follow the rules, I'll be okay, right? I can learn how to survive or live like this rather than rocking the boat. I don't even want to use the term rocking the boat with slavery, but rather than fighting back and I get killed or my family get killed or punished or whatever they types of things that they saw, which was a bunch of horrific stuff. And or they would tell or do things for favor of like, oh, if I say that such and such is trying to escape and I tell, maybe the enslavers will give me favor, right? But they still benefited when the people who were enslaved that fought back and made gains and kept fighting for rights and moving forward. The people that didn't want to fight, the people that helped the people that were enslaving them, helped their oppressors, they still benefited from the people who were willing to fight. And that's the same thing that's happening with patriarchy, is that you have men and women who are willing to fight against it. There are some women who are not willing to fight against it. There are some women who uphold it because they want the favor of men. They don't want to have to be worried about certain things or they're fearful of dealing with certain things. And so they uphold misogyny. They'll join in with the men attacking women for certain things because in their mind it's better to be aligned with the person with power than to fight back and possibly lose whatever rights or comforts that they have. So you see that in voting when women vote against their own interests. You see that in many ways in the way men are not held to standards, healthy standards for their sexual behavior, but women are not held to necessarily healthy standards, but they are mistreated, abused, talked about badly, ostracized, shamed about sexual behavior, which is neither way is healthy, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can see some of these things, these factors that I mentioned. Classism also has to do with celebrity status, money, things like that. So I'm going to talk about patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, celebrity, racism, legal system, religion, classism, accountability, and humanity. Accountability and humanity, I'm going to save for a little bit later, but the others I'm going to focus on Diddy's case to try to explain it in terms of how you can see differences based on these things. Diddy is Black, racism. Diddy is a man, gender. He is a cultural icon, classism. He has wealth, classism. He has status, classism. He's a music mogul. He has power, classism. So all these things, some of these things are not going to play to his favor, right? And some of them will. So the way you see that is Diddy, this Black man cultural icon with wealth and status, he's going to get away with certain things that someone who's white, a male that's white, poor, not known by celebrity status, is not going to get away with because Diddy has the resources and the power to, well, one, for people to overlook it because people just like value those things in other people. You have celebrity worship, you have worship of the rich, those type of things. You have, like I said, people with internalized patriarchy where they will try to protect him because he has those factors. But he can't get away with the same things necessarily that a white man with his same status can get away with because Race is a factor that also plays a part in the legal system in our everyday, like, lives, and what we allow or don't allow, or what institutions allow or don't allow. And so, but also then if you take a black woman who has a similar stature to Diddy, she can't get away with certain things that Diddy would be able to get away with. So these things play a factor in what we allow a person to do and what we don't allow a person to do, or what the legal system or people of power that are not in the legal system will allow a person to do versus what they won't allow a person to do. Let's kind of look at it in terms of sexual assault and how gender plays a part in gender, and sexism and misogyny can play a part in the way that we see sexual assault victims. So, if you have a man who is assaulted by another man, this also plays a part in why people stay quiet about sexual assault. So, if you have a man who's sexually assaulted by another man, people in their lack of knowledge will question that man's sexuality that was violated. They will question his manhood, not just about his sexuality, but about his strength or ability, and the fact that another man could violate him. So, who wants to, as a man, who wants to come forward and bring things to light where people will treat him this way over something that was done to him? So, they don't say anything. When a woman sexually violates a man, people seem to think that women can't rape men and that men won't get aroused even when they don't want to have sex, and that's just not true. And I'm going to try to together for you why this is important, because a similar thing happens, a similar mental thing happens with kids where they don't understand when they've been sexually violated what's happening with their bodies. Is kids, I used to work for Winona's House, the Regional Diagnostic Center for Children in Essex County. And they were focused on helping children who had experienced trauma. So I would work with psychologists, foster parents, parents, siblings, lawyers, social workers, judges, police officers to help children who have been abused, and including sexual abuse. And one of the things that will frequently come up with these 4, 5, 6 year olds, 7 year olds is how their body responded to certain touches, which was very confusing to them because it was a pleasure response. And what they didn't understand is that there are erogenous zones in the body that are not consciously controllable necessarily, and that you can have a pleasure response to being touched in certain places or certain things being done to you that you don't necessarily want. And that was very confusing to kids because it made them blame themselves for what happened, or made them have shame. But like, but if it felt good, but I didn't like it, then what does that mean? And then did I want it if it felt good? But if I didn't like it, if I didn't want it. So it was very confusing to them where they didn't understand that the feeling doesn't mean that you wanted to do it, because they're kids. They're trying to wrap their minds around what's happening to them that they should never have to wrap their minds around. And a similar thing happens where men get blamed for women sexually assaulting them because people don't believe they can get erect when they don't want to have sex. And that is not true. But also a shame around their manhood, being shamed of, are they weak? Why couldn't they fight off the woman? Or also, why don't you just want to have sex with a woman? Isn't that like, with patriarchy, sexism, don't you should just want to have sex with women? Like the way men are objectified in certain ways. Women are objectified, and it's worse because of its oppressive nature. But this supposedly positive thing about over sexualizing men, of like, you should, like, it's sex. Like, what's the problem? With a woman. Uh, when boys are sexually assaulted, again, the question of their sexuality comes into play, and they question their sexuality at times because certain feelings are being introduced to them in ways that they shouldn't be. And so there's a conditioning that can take place. It doesn't always take place, but it can take place. And also, there are men who are heterosexual that were sexually abused by men when they were younger. And so they're asking, like, does this mean that I'm homosexual? Because again, like, even homosexuality and homophobia plays a part in people, the way people deal with and understand sexual assault and not getting help. So when what like sometimes girls are conditioned to think that just like sexual assault and harassment is just like par for the course. You're born a woman, too bad. These are things that you have to learn how to deal with. You need to prevent these things from happening to you. You need to dress right, act right, don't be flirtatious, don't have a crush, don't be inappropriate in any way. And that is even for girls, not just women, where they're often blamed for assault taking place on them. Boys are not a blame when men assault them, because then it's like, oh, it's because the man is a homosexual, which that goes into homophobia. Um, and not the idea, like, I'll say it like this: when a boy is sexually assaulted by a woman, it's not the same reaction, because people unhealthily think that's a rite of passage for boys that boys should experience, when it is totally unhealthy, and it distorts their experience in relationship to sex and their relationship to women and sex with women as they age. And so, looking at it like women can't sexually abuse boys because they should want it and like it and they enjoy it. You saw, like, if you're familiar with hip hop culture, when Boosie said what he had done to his son, that was sexual assault. What Scrappy just recently shared on an interview about his mom getting strippers for his birthday party when he was a minor, I don't know how young, but he voiced that he was uncomfortable and his friends were uncomfortable. But his mom thought that this was some kind of thing that she was doing that was good for him. And still, as he said it that day, ignoring the fact that this was not something that was okay with him. He didn't like it. He didn't want it. And she still wasn't listening to him as an adult say, as a kid, he did not want this. So that has a lot to do with our understanding of sexism and patriarchy, about what is okay to do to boys and girls and what is appropriate versus what is inappropriate. And religion plays a part in those things too. So, can you identify, and you should be able to identify for yourself, the way these systems have affected you and your thinking about sex, relationships, your roles, and how you judge other people? And you might not be able to answer that question today, but it's something that you want to look up, you want to think about long term. And not just because of deviant SA, it plays a part also in your everyday relationships with your friends, and what they can talk to you about or let you know about what's happened to them, or just their relationships, period, and what you tell them they should be dealing with or not be dealing with, they're doing or not doing. So we talked a little bit about how that type of stigma keeps people quiet. Like for women, for boys, it's the homosexuality, it's questioning their manhood, it's calling them weak. For women, it's saying like, oh, you deserved it, you did something, you're too sexual, you're this and that. And that's even more for Black women and Black girls, because Black girls are sexualized. Not that they are more sexual or doing anything to be sexualized, but because they are Black, they are discriminated against, and there's prejudice against them in a particular way that makes people think that they're look at them as though they're not children, and like they are more sexual objects, and takes away looks at them in a way that is not the innocent girls that they are, and the childhood innocence. So let's talk about Diddy's trial. I think it's going to be hard, like, if I talk about the trial and I don't really say where my head was at. So maybe I'm going to talk about my understanding of Cassie and Jane's cases and what took place during the trial. And then I'll go into the reactions. Okay, so when Diddy's trial was taking place, like I said, I was interested from the time of the video. Prior to that, I was just waiting to see what was going to happen, because it was put out there that Cassie was going to put out a book, or that she had already confronted Diddy and told him that he needed to pay whatever amount of money, and that if he didn't, certain things would take place. I was aware of that. And I was aware of how Diddy came out with the video saying that he didn't do anything. And then shortly after that, things came out, and it was just like chaotic after that. And we found out a lot of things that we've never ever thought about in life, and things that we were in the chat. I was volunteering to be in the chat because I was following the case, and I have my reasons for that, and I'll talk about that later. But so, okay, now I want to go into things about the trial. So yes, we are finally here. Thank you for being here as long as you have been. Let's move on into the trial. So I think that before I go into the reactions to Diddy's trial, I think it's best that if I try to give you like a little insight into where my head was before the verdict and other things where people were giving their reactions or when people were giving their reactions during the trial. So your understanding or grasp or feelings are going to be different from mine because I am a psychologist who works with people who have experienced sexual trauma in general, but sexual trauma. Like I told you, I worked in Newark. That was like years ago, and I've continued to work with people who have experienced trauma. It's been about 15 years of working with people who have experienced sexual trauma from the time that I've worked with young kids to older adults and everything in between. And so how much time I spend in this and understanding this is very different than the average person. So I can only try to briefly explain some things to you that I think that you should take into consideration as you determine how to think about somebody as a victim or perpetrator. And let me just say this. A victim does not have to be someone you feel sorry for. A victim does not have to be someone that you like. A victim does not have to be someone you agree with. What it is that you have to look not just at the behaviors. You have to look at who they are and their behaviors in context, but you have to look at the situation in which it is being suggested that they were victimized, because that is what matters. It matters about the power dynamic, what factors were taking place at the time in which a person was victimized. Because sometimes we use the term true victim, and I think what that means is someone that you agree is a victim or you agree didn't do anything wrong and therefore didn't at all deserve anything bad. But that's not what a victim is, not whether you agree. There was this whole controversy that was taking place because whether you like, not whether you like him, I don't even want to. Charlie Kirk was a victim of gun violence. You don't have to like Charlie Kirk. You don't have to agree with his views. You don't have to be sad about whatever happens to him. You don't have to care, right? You don't have to empathize if you don't want to, um, with anything to do with him. But you're aware that gun violence is an issue, whether you agree with the person who was killed by gun violence. And so many people can understand that and will argue about how he's a victim and then want other people to empathize or be sorry. I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is, I'm not saying you should be sorry. I'm not saying you have to empathize. What I'm saying is trying to be objective about what something is and then dealing with the actual issue. People won't say, oh, he wasn't a victim of gun violence, right? Because they didn't like what he was saying or what he was doing or what he was instigating or what he stood for. People can still admit that was gun violence. Similar thing needs to take place with sexual assault and whether or not you like a victim and whether you agree with their choices and whether you like the perpetrator. So I will say also, I was a big fan of Diddy's. I grew up just like other people did my age with Diddy. I'm a Black person. So I grew up with him being a big influence in culture. He's a cultural icon. He's a beloved man and person and success story. And I love him in the videos, dancing all in the videos. As Suge Knight said, I enjoy all the music he was a part of and helped to create. I enjoyed his input in fashion. I enjoyed all of the bands that he made, even though because of his treatment and other things, they didn't go beyond into what they hope to go into. But I liked the music and the people that he chose, and he's very smart. He's very business savvy. He's a music mogul, but he had and has a very big influence on my culture, and I really loved his influence on my culture. So, and that's the same thing for R. Kelly. That's the same thing for Bill Cosby. So it hurt me when I had to come to understand that these people that I love in the sense of a fan, being a fan, or loving how the influence that they've had in culture and the music or art or TV, the things they've created, and even maybe who they were supposed to stand for as people, as far as Cosby and and um and Diddy. I don't think that people were looking at R. Kelly to stand for anything. But like Bill Cosby, especially, he represented this, especially back in his day, like this success story of a black man. And he represented that also in his TV family that everybody I knew loved and watched his show and can still quote things from his show and still love the actors from the show. So it was not easy, even for me personally, to come to learn these things about these people. And I personally had to wait to find out certain facts to be like, okay. So I'm not at all ever, asking people to immediately not believe people that they care for in some way or are inspired by in some way. But what's not okay is just ignoring when someone says something happened to them and not caring to find out the facts, not caring to do any kind of real, like, objective investigation of what happened to them. That's not okay. So I just want that. I'm saying that to say, like, I'm not someone who was rooting for Diddy's downfall or R. Kelly's or Cosby. It was the opposite. I was hoping they didn't do the things that people were saying that they did. And I waited to see what came out about what people were saying before I made any kind of judgment. I never would speak against someone saying that something happened to them, but I was like, I want to know more about what happened. But it was hard to fathom Bill Cosby doing the things that he did, but he himself was joking about it, right? So I understand people, wanting to protect Diddy. And but I also understand it's not just about protecting this black man, a successful man. It's also about celebrity worship. It's also about patriarchy, sexism, misogyny, that people hate Cassie. So when we talk about her story, these dynamics are in play, these power dynamics are in play that people don't care about when it comes to women. And that is a problem that allows not just people like Cassie or Jane to be abused, but it allows any woman to be abused. It allows any child to be abused. And in certain ways, it extends to the way that men are abused. So let's talk a little bit about Cassie and Jane's story of as far as the things that I think are very relevant, as far as you need to have an understanding of certain dynamics to understand how these things weren't okay and how they played a part in what happened. And you don't have to just take my word for it, but I'm just saying, following this, if you're like, I don't believe that, okay, research it. That's all I'm asking. Don't just take what people say on social media, your aunts, uncles, or however you grow up. Really go talk to an advocate, right, of DV awareness, not necessarily a mental health advocate, and we'll talk about that. But so let's talk about Cassie's story. I keep saying it. Let's talk about Cassie's story. Whether you like it or not, age dynamics play a part in people's relationships as far as who has power and who has less power in a relationship. Cassie, when she was 18, was with Ryan Leslie, who was 7 or 8 years her elder and a producer, so he could help her with her music career. And he did. He did that. But understand there was already a power dynamic there in which the person that was helping her with what she wanted to do was older than her. They were together. He introduced her to Diddy, who he believed was going to help the both of them. Diddy, when he met Cassie was 19, Diddy was 35. Diddy is 16 years older than Cassie. And I really want you to think about what you knew at 19, or what you thought you knew at 19, and what you didn't know that you thought you knew at 19. And if you at 19 years old had a dream and you are meeting the exact biggest person who can make your dreams and life, everything you wanted come true. Diddy was already a music mogul, had been for some years, well known, already a big part of the culture. You're 19 years old. Many people were enamored with Diddy by this time. Diddy takes her on. He signs her to a 10 album deal. Now, I want you to understand when we talk about power dynamics, first, the age. He's older, he's richer, he's wiser, he's a music mogul, he's world renowned. She's a 19-year-old nobody, a girl, a 19-year-old girl. That's what people call, you can call her a young woman. Let's see how I don't know how smart you were at 19, but I want you to also go look at Diddy's girls who are a year younger than her, and you tell me how grown 19 is and 18 is. So age, power difference. Rich, power difference. His class, status, celebrity, power difference. Has the keys to what you think is the kingdom. Power difference. And now he's your boss. He signed you for 10 albums. That's the lifetime of your career, pretty much. You know the type of artists that make 10 albums? Jay-Z, Lionel Richie, people like that make 10 albums. You cannot tell me that, I think Cassie is talented. I've seen her perform, but you cannot tell me that you thought that Diddy thought he was going to get 10 great albums from Cassie. Ashanti's a great artist. We don't have 10 albums from Ashanti. We don't have 10 albums from Maya, who's still around and just performed with Brandy. And Monica and Brandy don't have 10 albums. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not trying to discredit Cassie's talent. I'm saying that when you think about what I told you about financial manipulation and control, so if you have control over somebody's career for 10 albums, if you're that much older than them, that's not even a regular 35-year-old. You are a mogul. You are Diddy. And think about the power that he has. So if you think 19-year-old Cassie sashayed and used her feminine wiles to take advantage of Diddy, you cannot be for real. You cannot be serious. Diddy, who could have many women, Cassie was not the power was not equal. And if you're signing up thinking that someone is going to help you with your career, and so my understanding from what was testified and what was not denied is things that have records and not just rumor, that in some exchange when she was around 22, so she already had been interacting with him or whatever, they got together. But prior to that, the first time he kissed her, she was there to talk about her album or her career, and she cried because it wasn't necessarily what she wanted. But like many people do and women do, sometimes they realize that now they're in a position where the person that can help them or has power over them wants to be with them. And maybe at 19, you would have done the right thing. Some people, when I say the right thing, maybe you would have been like, oh, nope, I don't want to deal with this. I'm not dealing with this. But a lot of people don't say no to when someone has the keys, they think, to the kingdom. And so she's 19, she signs 10 albums, her lifetime, basically. And he works with her as an artist. He puts some of her stuff out, but she's recording a lot, and he's seemingly helping her career, having her record with different people, but he's not putting the music out. Not how many albums have you heard from Cassie? She did a mixtape. He didn't really promote it, they said, during the trial. So I think I should stop here and say this before I go into her case further. I was taking in information from all different types of sources because Diddy's trial was not recorded audio or video. Only one person who had been grandfathered in by the law could text about the trial while the trial was going on. All the other media people, journalists, lawyers that attended, YouTubers, influencers that attended, that went and sat either in the courtroom itself or in an adjacent room where they could watch a TV, they had to take notes or they had to buy and read this transcription of the trial. And so what I was doing was listening to all these different types of people analyze what was going, or report, just say what was said, but also give their analysis of the prosecutors, the defense, Diddy, the witnesses, the victims, the jurors, the experts, and what they were taking from it, how they felt about it, what they thought would happen. And I listened to people who I was like, oh, I can understand that from what I'm hearing, and I agree. And people I didn't agree with. I listened to people who didn't like Diddy, people who did. I listened to people who were neutral and just trying to report what was going on, or said they were neutral. I don't know if they're neutral or not. And so I wasn't shocked about the verdict or the sentencing because I was listening to people analyze what was happening. And the main thing that was said was, it's not what I heard lawyers say and what people reacted to, where they said, oh, like, it's not RICO. I didn't hear any lawyers say it's not RICO. I heard lawyers say that given they were trying to wait to see what came out, but they were saying it's going to be hard to prove RICO in the sense that you have to lay it out a certain way for the jury to understand. And they did not think that the jury was going to agree with some of the charges. And the reasons why they were saying is because people one of the things that kept coming up is people's understanding of sexual assault and DV, and that they were separating DV from the sexual assault and the sex trafficking. But I don't know if I briefly mentioned earlier that in domestic violence, you cannot separate coercion for the relationship in a specific incident, which domestic violence involves coercion, to when you want a person to do other things in the relationship. It cannot be separated because coercion has to do with the mental manipulation of control attack on a person's mind that does not just last in that moment. So you have this understanding of how I was getting the information and how I was taking it in. It was from different sources. And none of the lawyers said that I saw said that it wasn't RICO. They said that it's going to be hard for people to grasp it, that it's RICO in that way because it hasn't been presented in that way before. And people were going to have issues with certain things around the sexual activities. And to me, it's not because it's not sexual assault. It's because people lack an understanding about what sexual assault is. So in this relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend relationship. So also Diddy was with Kim Porter at the time that he got with Cassie, which also bothered people. But to go on with the facts of the case around abuse. They're together, 10 albums. She cried the first time he kissed her. She sits on the stand, pregnant, about to pop, and she admits to all the things. She admits to things that people would never ever want to admit to, not just sexually, but how she felt, jealousy, wanting his time and attention, begging for his time and attention, doing things for his time and attention, saying that she wanted to do things sexually, saying that she told him she wanted to do things sexually that she didn't want to do, and then telling him that she didn't want to do things sexually, and him pressuring her and forcing her to do things. So I don't know if you at this point know what a freak off is or you don't know. But if you don't know, I don't think any of us could imagine what a freak off was. I think when we first all heard that term, many of us thought it was like a celebrity orgy of some sort. And then when all the celebrities kept saying, I wasn't involved in a freak off, I didn't do a freak off, I didn't see a freak off. We're like, well, maybe there were no freak offs. What is this? A freak off. So I'm going to try to say this as PG-13 as I can, but it's no real way to say it PG-13. A freak off was where Diddy was exercising what someone called homo vicarious activity, in which it seemed, this is the interpretation, and I'll tell you what the behavior was. He seemed to be using his girlfriend's bodies with escorts, male escorts, and telling them exactly what he wanted them to do for his pleasure. And to me, what it sounds like, someone he wanted to interact with them in that way, but didn't. And so he was using women to do this. And maybe he didn't want to, but he was doing exactly what he wanted to do. I don't know. But he was having Cassie and other girlfriends hire escorts using his money at his prompting. Most of the time, I think something came up where she did it without him, but at this point, he had her doing this. And when they say she did it without him, it's unclear if he had her do it while he was supposedly not around, but was having her bring the person so he could join, whatever. But what it involved was her doing the activities basically that he instructed in the time frame and ways that he liked while he watched and tried to hide himself from whoever was there so they wouldn't know it was him. She tried with wigs and other things where people kind of started figuring out who they were. And I'm not going to go through all the details, but upon the completion, she would then take the man's essence and go into another room with Diddy and put it on his body. And they would have, like, after the escort was gone, they would have their own time. And she engaged in this at times, she said voluntary, but it got to a point where she wasn't really doing her music. He was doing other things to her that were abusive, and she didn't want to do these things anymore for his time or attention or for any reason. And he wasn't okay with that. And so he was pressuring her to do it and he was forcing her to do it. And when I say force is when you saw that video of him punching, kicking, and dragging Cassie by the hair, after that, he made her have a freak off. An escort testified that that was true. That's sexual assault. So it doesn't matter if 100 times she said yes to freak offs. In this one time, and it wasn't the only time, where she was refusing or fighting with him for whatever reason, then he beat her down and she didn't want to do it and he made her do it anyway. That's sexual assault. Another time, an escort, a whole separate time, an escort testified, another escort, that Diddy put his hands on Cassie, beat on her mouth was bloody, and that she went to the bathroom with him and came back out and said she was ready to do the freak off. That's sexual assault. That's physical assault. That's also sexual assault. So how do you, in that case and regard, argue that that is not sexual assault and that she's not a victim in that regard of sexual assault? What reasoning do you use? And is it tied to any other factors that I already mentioned about sexist, patriarchal, misogynistic views about women and sex? And maybe her being a gold digger, a sex worker, or whatever. But then, so if someone is a sex worker and they're exchanging, I'm not calling her a sex worker, but even if you're trying to look at her like that, if she is in fact a sex worker and she's exchanging her services for a record career, a career in music or whatever career, and he's keeping her from doing that in some regards because he's not putting out her music, and he's not paying her properly for the services. And let's say she says, no, not today. I don't want to do it today. I don't want to work today. And he beats her and makes her do that. Even if sex work was legal, that would be sexual assault. Your boss can't come drag you and make you go to work when you don't want to work. Even if you agreed to do a job, that's not how you deal with that. If sex work was legal, you go, you take them to court, you do whatever, but you don't beat somebody down, drag them back to the room and later make them have sex or work. And you may be saying, oh, well, she signed up for, you don't know what she signed up for. She could have signed up for some type of sex. You don't know that she signed up for that. But what I do know is she sat up on that stand and she admitted to all the things. So why would she admit to all the things that she agreed to that there wasn't even proof of, but she said she agreed? And what she wanted to do, and that she was even jealous when he was with other people doing certain things, but then say, oh, in this regard, I didn't want to do this. And this day he beat me and made me do it. And somebody else that was there and say, yes, that happened. And other witnesses say they've seen him beat on her. And people have testified she's run from him at times and security has dragged her back. People have testified that he beat on her, put a gash in her head, and she needed to get stitches from his personal doctor because he can't take her to a hospital, got to keep it secret so she can't report abuse. That he made her get breast implants that she didn't want, and when he didn't like them, he made her go back into surgery while her body was still sore, close to the time that she already had surgery to fix them or do whatever. That he threatened her many times to release sex tapes of her. That he threatened her parents to release sex tapes at their jobs and get them fired, or release sex tapes, and that if they didn't pay him $20,000, which they remortgaged their house to do, to keep him from releasing sex tapes of her. That he broke up with her for some period of time. She, knowing that he was doing all these things, still tried to be with Kid Cudi, and that he broke into Kid Cudi's home. Kid Cudi testified to this. Broke into Kid Cudi's home, opened up his Christmas gifts, terrorized his dog, and then later came back and blew up his car with a Molotov cocktail. So you tell me somebody's blowing up the cars of people you want to be with, how you have control of your body or who you have sex with and what you want to do. She had run from him at resorts or wherever, hiding outside. And so the thing with the freak offs, that's where the baby oil and all that, because it was like these marathons of sex with escorts. And also what happened is Whether she had UTIs, sores in her mouth, sores in her body, he still made her do these things with escorts. And she was also getting liquid waste from men on her, if you know what I mean. And you're like, oh, she liked that. She wanted that. One thing I will tell you is that people that engage in those type of activities have already had things happen to them. So if she wasn't engaging in those activities before and she started to, it's likely to do with the fact that she was being abused. That type of degradation usually comes from people who have already experienced some forms of abuse. So he was having her do that, whether she had sores. And now you think if you're a woman, what a UTI is like, or if you had sores from sex somewhere, if you would want to be still engaging in marathon sex with an escort without condoms. Also, that's another thing. He wouldn't let her use condoms. And Jane testified to the same thing. And so if you don't care about her age and you don't care about anything else, I just want to know how you justify watching that video where he beat her. And then when he came online and bold-faced lied to the public saying that he did nothing to her and that it would come out and she's lying and blah, blah, blah. And she had all the receipts of the things that he was doing. And he tried to pay her, but it was too late because he made her put together a case that now the feds can get a hold of. So you bold-faced lie and say you did nothing, and then a video comes out of you punching, pummeling, kicking, dragging this girl by the hair. I want to know how people look at that and say, she's not a victim. He didn't do anything wrong. What goes on in your mind, and then how people are safe around you, where that to you is excusable because she wanted money or whatever you think she fame or whatever you think she wanted, made it okay for him to do that to her. How is that equivalent in exchange? And mind you, she came to him for fame and money and a job. It's not like she tried to like come to him like she was in love with him and trying to be his wife and she tried to wiggle her way into that. She came to him to be her boss and help her get these things on her own. So I'm taking that into consideration when I hear that these are the facts that were presented that was admitted to during. It's like, okay, but that beating on video, that was DV, so it doesn't count. And that's what happened. It was considered as not counting because people's lack of understanding of DV and assault. So you tell me, like, if you get the crap beat out of you one day for not wanting to do something, are you gonna you gonna wait for them to beat the crap out of you for other things that they want you to do? Have they already put gashes in your head and they've already restricted you financially? He beat up one of her friends that sued him, that left her the isolation, you're threatening the parents, they said threatening themselves or others. These are all things that fall under abuse. So how do you objectively say that he didn't abuse her? And or how do you objectively say like, yeah, he abused her, but like so she deserved it and oh well, like she got what she wanted out of it, so who cares? But you don't want anything to happen to him. So these are the reactions I'm speaking to when I say that. So let's talk a little bit about Jane, which her case is more complex. And I think it even like muddied some of Cassie's report. And that's nothing against Jane because she's just telling her story. I think the issue with Jane is Jane was already grown when she met Diddy. Cassie's technically grown, but she was 19 and it continued. And if you're abused when you're younger, it doesn't erase as you get older. You don't suddenly become this self-aware, free person out of nowhere. You have to, like, she was fighting for it. But abuse is a conditioning that lives on in a person's mind and behavior. It's not just a one-time occurrence and then it's over. It doesn't have any other implications. That's not how abuse works. Unfortunately, I wish it worked like that, but that's not how it works. So Jane's case was more of an issue because Jane was currently getting money from Diddy. He was currently paying for where she stayed in the like elaborate, lavish home that she lived in because she was getting an allowance from Diddy. And Jane met him while he was dating one of her friends, and then she started dating him. That people are not going to like that, understandably. Jane was also like wanting Diddy to love her, like wanting more time and attention and not really grasping like he's really only interested in you for these freak offs. So he found somebody else when Cassie went to exit and kept having these issues over her not wanting to engage in these sex acts that Diddy wanted her to engage. And I'm sorry, I have to go back. Cassie developed a drug addiction and mental health issues as a result of this whole relationship and behaviors that she engaged in. That she'll say that she engaged in. She won't say, "Oh, I got all these things just from the time that from that day that he abused me." She'll say, like, from things she chose to do and things she didn't choose to do. And so when we talk about accountability, it's like this person is up here telling you all their deepest, darkest secrets and the responsibility that they had in them. And then you're saying she's not accountable. What do you think accountability looks like? And then she didn't run out and, go marry or try to get with somebody else with all this money and all this other stuff of being like, you call her a gold digger or whatever. She went and she's with someone who seemed, I don't know their relationship, but the way he talks publicly, he was defending her even though she had done things that were hurtful to him in her mental illness and behavior in trying to recover from the abuse, where she said that Diddy raped her one time when their relationship was over and they met up, and that she had went back to him even after that and voluntarily had sex with him, because that can happen. And people that have been in DV relationships where their partners have forced themselves on them can tell you that they've done that if they ever wanted to share that with you. But a lot of them have so much shame around that, they probably won't. Because there's this misconception that people don't go back after being raped, but it's just not true, especially when it's your partner. So Jane really wanted Diddy's love and attention and time, and he really just wasn't willing to give it to her. But also, he would manipulate her and lie to her and tell her they were going to spend time together, just the two of them. But then he would sneak in a freak off in there and tell her, "Oh, afterwards," and she would keep doing it. It got to the point where he basically, because she would keep complaining about having to do these freak offs, he also would not allow her to use a condom, and she was complaining. He basically told her, "You need to get on your job," which sounded like to me, "This is your job, these freak offs, so you need to do them." So again, even if she's a sex worker, if she doesn't want to work on a particular day, so if you're like, "Oh, I don't think any of that makes her a victim," let me say this. One, she had to be available to him. She couldn't really do any other things because you can't just get up and leave jobs or not do work and have a consistent income and you then stop to go do freak offs for however long you're gone, a week or however many days, and then recover. Also, I think you should know there was a recovery time for their bodies for the things that were happening to their bodies, not just from the drugs, but yes, from the drugs, but from the physical wear and tear on their bodies. They needed rest and recovery after these events. So Jane, on a particular day, became very jealous about someone Diddy was seen with publicly, and she physically assaulted Diddy. And Diddy, in return, beat her down. Now, that's a domestic violence incident between the two of them, but it goes beyond that. After he beat her down, she was so scared, she ran somewhere outside her home and hid outside for hours. And when she came back, guess what he forced her to do? Have a freak off. That's sexual assault. You cannot beat somebody up, right? It would be the same if she was like, "Yeah, now you gotta have sex with me," after hurting him. That's domestic abuse. But still, there's a dynamic of power there that is not equal. And so you might be saying, like, "Oh, this is not, I don't get it. I don't know." It's kind of like you're like, "Oh, look at all of them are bad. So why does he get in trouble more?" I mean, I don't agree with that. But I guess like think of it in terms of if you were uh um let's say that you met a robber, a burglar, and they were more in the business than you were, and they were like, "Oh, I can help you with this. Like we can team up, right? Come rob people's homes or houses or whatever with me." And you're like, "Yeah, sure." And you start to notice like they're controlling everything. They're controlling how much of the cut you get. They're controlling what houses you go to. You don't want to work with them anymore, right? So you're like, "I don't really want to, I would like to go my separate way." And they're like, "No, I have videos of you robbing people with me. and I'm going to put them out there for everyone to see. I'm not in the videos, you're in the videos. And also, like, if they didn't want to help them that day, they pistol whipped them, beat them down, or shot them. Right? Because you'd be like, oh, they're all doing wrong, so who cares? Who do you think is more wrong in the situation? Is it the person who is trying to gain from robbing people? They're both robbing people. They're both doing something wrong. But so then it's like, oh yeah, no, the person who like shot them, like they're not, I mean, it's equal, it's even. They both were robbing. No, it's not. I mean, it's all, if you want to judge the sexual behaviors that Cassie had and Diddy had. But let's be clear, Diddy was in control of that sexual dynamic. Or if you want to judge Jane. And you're like, oh, well, they asked for it. Like, who cares? That's what they wanted to do. If you want to believe that. Again, I don't think that at 19 or even at 30 something, at my big age, would have never imagined that's what a freak off was, or that's what Diddy was doing, or having anybody do. An escort who was invited didn't know that that's what it was. He was like, I never been to a freak off. Sir, you were the freak off. Like, what do you mean you've never been to a freak off? It's like, if you're like, oh, well, they wanted it and it's like, it doesn't mean that he's not an abuser, because they, in your mind, were willing to be abused. And if somebody's willing to be abused, obviously there's something not right with them. And we have a responsibility when someone is ill or not psychologically sound, to try to do things in their best interest and not take advantage of that. And so it's like, if a person who's not in their right state of mind is like, hit me with your car, go ahead, hit me with the car. And you're like, okay, and you hit them with the car. You now assaulted them. It doesn't matter what they said to do or what they said was okay. You are now, you can now go to jail for assaulting them, right? It's like if a person said, if you give me fame, money, stardom, I'll let you stab me every month. If you stab them, you're disturbed. Something is going on with you that has to be addressed. You're not safe. People are not safe with you. And so it'll be like, no, it's okay. He stabbed her. Like, she asked for it. She wanted things from him. That's essentially what we're saying when it's like, too bad what happened to Cassie, because she asked for it and she got this and that. And no, whatever you think of Cassie, he's still a predator, and that behavior was still victimizing. So, and you think it only applies to them when you say certain things, but actually other people who have been abused and have shame about maybe their behavior that wasn't as bad or sexual or whatever, still they hear that and like, yeah, no, I'm not going to say anything about what happened to me, because I see how people feel. Even when somebody's in the wrong, they don't care. So let's move on, because I think like what highlights this is a discussion that I had with a mental health advocate.